Hello to everyone in the Holy Trinity Greek Orthodox Cathedral community. This is Father Jonathan. It's such a joy to be speaking to you. I'd like to extend a special greeting to all our young adults and our college students who watch these videos, and also anyone who's watching these videos near or afar. It's always a joy to know that I'm having an opportunity to in some way reach out to you. Hopefully you're feeling more connected to Holy Trinity, to your faith through these videos. We're going to continue the series that I started a few weeks ago. I was away, but I did a little bit, something like it by posting my sermons for when I was in Boston at St. Demetrius in Weston, Massachusetts. It was such a great joy to be there. My home parish, first time serving as a priest there. It was such a joy. So we'll be speaking about the epistle and gospel readings. And as we're doing this, I want to have you keep something in mind and maybe meditate on the possibility. It might be worthwhile for us as a community of young adults, as college students, anyone who's watching this video, to maybe meet in person if you're here in the Charlotte area, to go over these epistle and gospel readings for this Sundays in anticipation of the Sunday. And so maybe a weekly Bible study on the epistle and gospel reading of the coming Sunday might be a way to deepen your connection to your faith, to better understand the scriptures and why we're reading which passage each week. And so keep that in mind. We might be talking a little bit more about how to put that into practice in the coming weeks, maybe starting at the end of the year or the beginning of the next calendar year. So we'll go right into the gospel and epistle reading for this week. And it's really interesting. We find ourselves having a little bit of a juxtaposition, of contrasting juxtaposition of two ideas. In the epistle, we're hearing from Paul that we are not justified by works of the law, but by faith. We are saved by our faith. We have salvation. We enter into the kingdom not by works of the law, but by our faith. But in the gospel reading, we find that we're told that a lawyer, someone who knew the law well, comes to Christ and asks, "What must I do to be saved, to have salvation?" And Christ says, "Well, you know the law." So Christ tells us that salvation comes to us when we enact the law, but Paul is reminding us that we are justified by faith and not by works of the law. And so how do we deal with this dichotomy, with this apparent confusion, especially because Christ is saying something on one hand, and St. Paul, the predominant author of the New Testament, is saying something that seems to be quite different. Well, in the story that we're hearing of this lawyer who approaches Christ and asks the question, something further happens. Christ tells him, "You know the law. What are the two greatest commandments?" He says, and the lawyer responds, "To love our God with all our heart, our mind, our soul, and strength, and our neighbor as ourselves." He understands that ultimately the law is about love. The law is about love for God and love for neighbor. And then he says, Christ says to the man, "Go and do these things." Well, the man, wants to justify himself. He's a lawyer. He wants to say, "Well, I do these things from my youth. What more shall I do?" And Christ, understanding the challenge that the man was having with this, he says, asks him, he responds to the man's question of, "Who is my neighbor?" wanting to justify himself with the story of the Good Samaritan. And in brief, a man falls among robbers and is beaten and left half dead on the road. And first a priest walks by and crosses to the other side of the street, avoiding him on his way to his religious practices, his observances of the law. The same thing with a scribe, a lawyer, someone who knows the law very well, what passes by not to be tainted by the man who had been bleeding, because if you were to touch blood, you'd be ritually unclean and you wouldn't be able to continue with your services at that time. And then a man walks by a third man, a Samaritan, someone who wouldn't have any dealings with Jews, almost an enemy of the Jews, walks by and has mercy on the man. and heals and takes him, binds his wounds, puts wine and oil for his wounds, and brings him to a hotel, pays for his stay, and says he'll return and pay for any additional charges that the man incurs during his time there. And Christ, after telling this story, asks the lawyer, well, which one of these men proved to be neighbor? And the man responds, well, the one who was merciful, or the one that showed the man mercy. And Christ says, go and do likewise. So what does this say? It says that, yes, we're not justified by the law because the priest and the scribe were following the law. They were not being ritually impure. The priest probably had some duties in the temple he had to go to. The scribe had some task that he needed to do, and he couldn't touch the man because he was following the letter of the law. Both of them were. And yet the Samaritan one actually fulfills the commandments, the deep spirit of the commandments of love for neighbor, because he showed mercy. And so we're not justified by our completion or fulfillment of the law, but we are, but we're justified by our faith. But our faith is made apparent in the things that we do. That's what St. James's epistle, the brother of the Lord, St. Jacobus' epistle, says to us. He clarifies for us what Paul is really saying. He's not saying that all actions are not an indication of the state of our spiritual life, of our faith life. It's not enough to say that we are justified by faith, because faith without works is dead. But not works of the law, not the rituals that we have to do. It's not the fasting that saves us. It's not the going to the services that saves us. It's not all of the rules that the priest and the scribe were accomplishing that save us. No, it's our works of mercy, our works of love, our works of compassion that will allow us to reap the benefits of the freely giving, grace-filled gift of salvation. This is what God gives us freely. We don't have to do anything in order to be offered this gift. But in receiving it in faith, in trust, pistis is trust, it's faith. It's not just belief in an idea, it's a relationship with God. In doing this, we're called to offer love. The same love that we've received through Christ's sacrifice, his death, his resurrection, his ascension into heaven. Through the Holy Spirit, we are joined to Christ, and we are to offer the love of God that is God's very being to the world. And that's what it means to fulfill the law in actuality. So we're not justified by doing the minutiae. We find truth in our salvation. We actualize the reality of our salvation in our capacity to love others. This is a little bit longer, but it was a really deep and beautiful comparison in these two passages. And we could talk more about this if you want. Please feel free to like and subscribe to our channel here on YouTube, and watch us on social media, Facebook, anything that we post. We'll try to post on Instagram as well. But really, really engage, ask questions, wrestle with this, because it's complex, it's deep. And it's not just something we have to accept at face value, but we have to wrestle with it, not only to see if it's true, but see if it's true in our lives and how we can actualize it in our lives. God bless you. I look forward to seeing you all soon. Thank you.